say thank you for coming along today. All right, so we're going to get started. Our main speaker for today is Benni. I'll probably botch your surname, Benni De Jagere, I think it is. I'll let you introduce yourself when we get started. So Benni will come on in about 15 minutes. And before that, I just want to say thank you to Iman and welcome. Thanks for sponsoring, as always. And Iman's going to do a brief session. He's going to be presenting for about 10 minutes. I'll let Iman introduce his own topic. So yeah, so hopefully just get comfortable. Thanks a lot for coming live. Thanks also to the people that have joined online. I realise it's hard to get into the city from at times. So yeah, thank you for joining as well. So let me see if I can advance this slide and we'll pass over to Iman. Sorry, mate, user error. I'll have to pass over to you.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you. So just checking everyone on the Teams call. Can you hear us okay? Maybe just show some.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All good? Okay, thank you. So let's get this started. Next. All right, so as you know, Agile Analytics is a Microsoft Gold partner and specialist in data analytics, application integration, and cloud platform. So if you need help with any of those services like data platform integration, BI, and advanced analytics, please feel free to contact me or one of my colleagues. We also have some of the Power BI packages that we call them accelerators, in case that you need to implement any of those for your company, being in some industry or domain specific projects, or maybe by business function, like we have financial analytics, marketing, HR, and so on. So you can see some of them in App Source, download, play with them, and then if you need to get the PBIX file and use it in your project, that can save you weeks or months of work very easily. And we also provide some training and other services. Okay, so my presentation is very short, and this is basically for people who want to build Power BI COE, Center of Excellence, in their organization. Just before I start, how many of you have already implemented Power BI COE in your organization, or you are in progress in the process of starting that? Anyone? No? Okay. Anyone interested in that topic at all? Okay, few people, that's good. So these are not, something that I made up. This is recommended by Microsoft, and I have a link at the end of this presentation that you can go and read all the details. But I added a few things from myself as well as the article and some of the recommendations from Microsoft. So as usual, I recommend that you start with why. You need to understand why you need this COE. Is it because you have many teams and people are using Power BI but not in a standard way? You may have some concerns that people are building reports but they may not follow the best practices, and maybe there are some skill gaps in the team, that not every team has a good data modeler, a good maybe DAX expert, a good data visualization guru, and maybe you want to have a centralized team that can service all of those. Or you may see this a lot, that we see in almost every organization, that people are using Power BI the same way as they do work with Excel. So you may find it and you may have concern that, okay, is this even scalable? Is it maintainable after people build hundreds of reports? Is it even easy to use them and scale, or people may leave organization and you don't know what to do with those? Okay, so very typical situation with many organizations, and that's why we believe that having a COE in every organization is important. But before you start, as I said, you need to define the business objectives and then the goals, that why you need that COE, and based on that you can set up the right roles and responsibilities. Also ask the question that, do you need a Power BI COE or general BI or analytics COE? Because this could be more than just Power BI. You may want to build it for all the analytics and BI functions, not just for Power BI. Okay, so as you see here, again, I share the links with you. You can read them later, but you need to define goals. Is it to evangelize about data-driven culture? You want to promote and help with adoption of Power BI and making different business areas more data-driven. You want to mentor, guide, and make sure that people are using Power BI in the right way, and so on and so forth. And set the right expectation, because in many organizations, I see that they expect that COE is their help desk. So it's not help desk that you are building. This is actually a center of excellence that is different to help desk. Yes, it can help you in some cases as a help desk, but it's not just a help desk function that you are building. I think someone needs to, let me just mute everyone. Oh, you got, okay. As I said, based on that scope of work and the maybe budget that you have and the size of organization, you may come up with some roles and responsibilities. You see some of them here, like a COE, leader, coach, trainer, data analyst, and so on. And in some organizations, you may have one person acting in different roles. You may have a person who is a coach as well as trainer and maybe a data engineer as well, and so on. Okay, so again, it depends on number of factors, but you need to define those roles and responsibilities so you know who you need in the COE. And there are different types of COE structure. You may go from centralized to unified COE to more federated or decentralized. And each of those have their own pros and cons, and you need to define what is it that you want. Do you want one side of extreme, the other side, or something in between? Which could be, a centralized place that everyone needs to go and get, help from them, or could be a COE that is independently managed by different business units. Okay, and then how to fund COE, because it could be a cost center, could be a profit center with project budget, or could be a combination of them. Again, those are things that you need to start thinking. How do we fund this COE? Do we want to get a project funding from each team? Do we want to have a cost center that get a budget for it, or something in between? And the maturity level, as you see here, again, these are defined by Microsoft, and we see relatively, again, very similar to this in different organizations. You may start with something that is, we call level 100 initial, to something more repeatable, defined, capable, and efficient. Okay, so you start small, and then you can go through this level of maturity. What if you don't have budget for a COE? Because some organizations may have only one person, managing everything in Power BI and so on. I think from what we see is that first you can start small. Even if you only have one person, you can go with that, and then as you get more requirements and more adoption, you can expand and you get more budget, so you can have a bigger COE and more, I guess, well structured COE. You can outsource part of it, so of course you don't need to hire 10 people. You can maybe get 1 or 2 and then outsource some of those to other companies, or completely outsource the whole COE. Like some companies like us, we offer COE as a service. So that means you don't need to hire a number of people. You just need to define where your gaps are, where you need help. Do you need to get some best practices, some assessments, some of the roles that you already have in-house, and you need to complement it with people from maybe another company. So that's it, and this is the link to reference document by Microsoft. If you want to have a look, there's a good set of articles for adoption roadmap, and then Center of Excellence is one of those. Any questions? No? Okay, Jeff. Yes, absolutely. We send you the link so you can download all these slides after this session. Thank you. So,
any questions from anyone online? If you have any questions for Iman? Nothing at this stage. So, okay, great. Well, thanks very much, Iman. Just one sponsor word from me before we hand over to Benny. So for those of you that are based in Sydney, I have a training course. So just like this meetup that we're trying to get back face to face, I'm also trying to restart my face-to-face training courses here in Sydney. So we have our first one ready to go on the 9th and 10th of May. This is definitely going ahead in North Sydney. So it's a 2-day training course. I call it Power BI for the Business Analyst. It basically is an introduction to using Power BI and an introduction to learning the DAX language. We touch a little bit on Power Query as well. So if you're interested, there's a QR code there, or you can just go to my website. I do have a 20% discount coupon for anyone from the user group, so SIDPUG. Just use that at checkout, and that'll be live until the end of this month. So if you're interested, please feel free to come along. I'd love to have you there. Okay, so with that, I'm going to hand over to Benny. Now, Benny, I think you should be able to share your screen, and maybe you can turn on your camera. Yeah, so we'll turn off our screen at this end. There he is. So, g'day, Benny. Welcome. Now, I was trying to think on the way in, Benny. When was the first time we met? It was like 4 years ago or 5 years ago. I think we were in Brussels at a Power BI conference. I can't remember what it was, but
it was December 2019. I was talking about that world tour like last week.
Yeah, that was the one. So anyway, good to see you again. And since then, you've turned to the dark side. So you're no longer working in the freelancing space. You're now working for Microsoft.
Sell out, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll leave you to introduce yourself, Benny, and what you're doing now at Microsoft. And so Benny tonight's going to talk about tenant administration. It's one of those things that I've noticed over the last, however long it is, 6 years. There used to be like literally one tenant setting, and now there's like a bazillion of them. So I'm actually really looking forward to this. Is not something that I would get deep into, but it would be very interesting to understand what is possible. And so I'm really looking forward to your presentation. So thank you, Benny. Thanks for joining us, and I'll hand over to you.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Aman. And thank you for all the people joining both in person and online. Let me get started. First off, by introducing myself. My name is Benni De Jagere. So Matt's attempt at pronouncing my surname was not that bad. I've heard lots and lots of worse attempts than that. Myself, I am now working in the Power BI CAT team. So that's the customer advisory team at Microsoft since December 2021. Sorry. What I do on a daily basis is I try to help customers. That's the summary of things. Try to help customers and get feedback from customers from community, take that feedback back into our product group, and then make well put attempts into improving the situation as it currently is. I also engage in a user group myself in Belgium called Data Mines. If you want to find me on any of the social channels, if you want to ask me a question, if you want to ping me, whatever, reach out on any of these. I will do my best to get back to you soon, but I'm not as nimble in my responses as I used to be. That said, you can also find everything I put public onto a GitHub link, which is the same alias as every of the other things. I did already put the slides up into the chat for the early joiners. I will put it again. We'll put it in again a bit later. And then there is also a QR code at the end of the session, so you can find those slides as well. And then I'm not overly fond of pie charts. Let me just keep it at that one. So what are we diving into right now in these next 44 minutes? I mainly want to make sure that you, as a tenant admin, a potential tenant admin, an accidental tenant admin, whatever, are aware of the role that auditing and logging plays in this entire endeavor of being a tenant admin. And then I also want to stand still a bit on some of the common patterns that I've seen in the years that I've been doing these things, and make sure that you've got some ideas that can potentially be useful to you, so that you can take them back with you and have a discussion, have a chat with someone at your own organization, your customers, whatever, and try to do something with this information that you've gained here. And then I also want to make sure that you're aware of that there are a number of free techniques that exist out there to help make sure you can set something up quickly and easily. But then, okay, let's get started. So hello to all of you accidental, potential, all you seasoned tenant admins. The thing is, why am I saying accidental tenant admins? Especially in the early days, talking about 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't run into that many dedicated admins, especially in the small and medium businesses. For larger organizations, yes, you could start seeing some more people that were dedicated into the admin resourcing space. But even still now, it's not that common that someone is only working on a tenant admin, on the tenant admin space for Power BI. And then, especially if we look at the combination with Microsoft 365 or Office 365, as you want to call it, the overlap with that is often not the case. You have dedicated Power BI admins, you have dedicated Office 365 admins. I've even run into organizations where they don't know each other, where people don't know who's doing what, and people don't know how to get a hold of each other. And also what I've seen is that plenty of the admins, the tenant admins that I've run into, were often appointed by association. The statements like, well, you're the person managing the SQL databases and Power BI is data. So yeah, well, why don't you just do Power BI admin as well? And then they get that additional chunk of responsibilities with them. And especially in the early days, a lot of the experiences were based on trial and error, especially because Power BI is essentially a moving target that's moving at the speed of light, and things keep changing. As Matt mentioned in the beginning, there was 1 or 2 tenant settings 6 years ago, and I think we're currently at 130 different tenant settings that are already out there. And luckily, the community and the enterprise maturity that we've seen has risen exponentially. People are much more aware of what the tenant admin is and what they can do for these things, which is a great thing. But like I mentioned, it's still a bit hard because Power BI is a moving target. Desktop gets updated, Power BI service gets updated, you get API updates, you get gateway updates, everything is being updated all the time. And then initially, when I was still a consultant and not a corporate sellout, I used to go up to clients and then have a discussion with them because they thought that Power BI was just a data visualization tool. It was just that little exe file that you open up on your desktop, make some graphs, and then that's the thing of it. Well, one of my favorite things to do at that specific point was refer to this little diagram of doom by Melissa Coates. And Melissa Coates is a lovely person working in the United States who produces this end-to-end diagram that essentially depicts all of the moving components in the Power BI sphere. We're not diving into each and every one of these because then I'd need 3 days straight to do this, but it is just to give you an idea of the massive landscape that it is. But this is also me giving you the message, you don't have to know all of these things. I mean, it's virtually impossible. Even the people that I work with in the CAT team are not aware of all these different things. We split up into focus areas for a very good reason. But then, okay, let's go on to the tenant admins. What do they actually do? And for a lot of people, they think that admins are just those grumpy people that are sitting behind their desk and say no to everything. Well, in many cases, well, not in many cases, in some cases, it's true. But for me personally, it shouldn't be this way. And Iman also briefly introduced the topic of a center of excellence, which relies heavily on something called a data culture. And for me, a tenant admin is a crucial piece of that data culture. And for me, they should strive to empower and enable that data culture in their organization. Simply saying no and restricting and disabling everything isn't going to work in the long run because people are just going to find their own way around things. They're going to go back to Excel, Access, exports, whatever they do, whatever they can to get their work done. So if we're restricting something, it means that we need to have something of a policy, a process, and people, actual people in place to be able to handle these incoming requests as well, to be able to make sure that those people can do their actual jobs. And a tenant admin is a crucial piece of that puzzle, but they cannot do this alone. They cannot do this alone. As I mentioned, they're a piece of the puzzle, but they're not the entire puzzle. So what does a tenant admin actually do? Well, a tenant admin wears many different hats. They're the ones making sure, they're the ones handling often data management. Who gets access to what data is coming from where, governance part, who should be able to access what are we doing to make sure that the data is made available to the right people? Security and compliance. Are we adhering to risk standards that we have internally, externally, all these things? The change management aspects, because of Power BI and its rapid pace of the releases, we actually also need to make sure that users are aware of things changing. For instance, the big changes that we had a couple of months ago with the user interface changing, or new features like the datasets hub being introduced. Those are all things that we need to make sure that our people are aware of. And in ideal scenarios, it's the center of excellence that handles a lot of these responsibilities, but they will lean heavily on that tenant admin to do so. Product integration. How are they making sure that data from the Oracle or the DB2 systems on premises is getting to the point where it needs to be in Power BI? And then as well, I mean, problem solving. They are often referred to as the help desk, which Iman just mentioned as well. It shouldn't be the case, especially for a COE or a tenant admin, but it does happen in a lot of cases. But for me, most importantly, a tenant admin simply does magic. Because of the fact that they wear so many different hats, because of the fact that they do so many different things, need to balance that many balls into the air, it's pretty much magic, period. So what are some of the things that they do need to be aware of, in my personal opinion? Well, first and foremost, I think the service health is a key metric to keep an eye on. In those cases where people run up to you and say, hey, this is not working, one of the first things that you should rule out is, okay, is it a Power BI feature that is not working the way it should be? Or is it something happening internally at us? It is the problem-solving method where you're deducing possible origins. And then the first step for this is making sure that you have a close eye on the Power BI support page. The link is included in the site, so you can easily click through when you get the slides. And this will list out the issues that are currently existing and the regions where they're happening. Is it always a real-time alert? No, but mostly for longer ongoing issues, you will see the actual situation of things on this page as well. And then, as a tenant admin, you'll potentially also want to be, you'll want it to be notified of service outages or severe incidents. And here, once you enable this, you can input a security group, and this will give you an email for whenever something serious is happening. I know it's an email, and you're going to be the one responsible for actually checking that email and knowing what's in there. But it is better to know that something is happening than not knowing at all. When you're working with Power BI, it is a piece of the puzzle in Azure. If you're looking at getting data from Azure SQL Database or Synapse, those are also pieces that have uptime and downtime. But what if something happens with Azure Active Directory and you cannot authenticate yourself? That would mean that people cannot access Power BI as well. So the Azure status page is also one of the key ones to keep in mind when you're looking at a service health perspective. And then as well, for the Microsoft, for the Office 365 tenant piece, there is also this admin center where you can look for the tailored alerts specifically for your own organization, for your own tenant. What I'm trying to mean with these three things is, if someone comes to ask you, hey, why is this not happening? And it sounds like it can be one of the issues that Microsoft is doing for you, check these portals or have an eye somewhere on these, because it can help you rule out causes quickly, and it will help you deduce the actual root causes more easily and making sure that you can get to this problem as quickly as possible. Then, I cannot stress this enough. The most important thing for you as a tenant admin or a potential tenant admin is getting the activity log up and running. For me, this is the treasure trove. This is the insights that you're able to get on who's doing what in your tenant. And the activity log was introduced in December 2019. And it's essentially the boiled down version of the Office 365 audit log in the Security and Compliance Center. It means that whenever user XYZ opens a report, this will get logged in the log. Whenever a person shares a report, this will get logged. Whenever they're using a custom visual and they're trying to authenticate with a token, this will get logged. And if you're trying to solve issues, hey, is this report actually being used, or are people doing stuff with gateways? Your activity log is always going to be the answer. And the reason why this was introduced, the activity log over the audit log in Office 365, was for permissions, mostly, because for being able to extract data from the Office 365 audit log, you needed to have permissions on the Office 365 tenant. And as I mentioned in the beginning, not in every organization, those two people are aware of who is who. With the activity log, you only need permissions on the Power BI side, which makes it a lot more easy to get to this data. The data in there is only retained for 30 days, which means that if you call on the activity log today, you will at maximum get data back to 30 days ago. And as soon as you're through this, you will not have an easy way of getting this data out. I mean, if you're using the activity log, you will not have a way to get this data out. So I do encourage you to make sure that you set up a process that gets this data out of there and log it somewhere. Is it CSV files on a local drive? Is it a blob storage? Is it a database, a data lake? Whatever, persist the data somewhere, because it will make it a lot easier to deal with these questions when they come back in the later time. And then to get the activity log up and running, you either need a Power BI admin role or the Office 365 global admin role. And for me, it is the key to many of these questions. Because as I said, if a person is opening, publishing, sharing, editing a report, you'll notice. If a person is fiddling about with gateways, you'll notice. If a person is doing publish to web, you'll notice. This is the key to all of these answers that you're needing when you're administering your tenant. I've also included a small PowerShell example in the PowerPoint deck where you can run a PowerShell script to extract that data. If you do a simple Google search, you'll find many more solutions out there for Azure Functions, for Azure Data Factory. I've even seen people do it with Power Automate. Whatever floats your boat and whatever you're using in the organization, you can easily find examples out there. But I cannot keep stressing enough how important this data is for you to make sure that you have the answer. And then as well, there are lots of docs pages that exist into what data is actually being logged, what you can do with it. So I do encourage you to go look at these things. And then the same thing in the extension of the activity log is the artifact inventory. But then what do I mean with an artifact? It's a question that I get more often. And an artifact in Power BI is a data set, a dashboard, a report, a workspace, something that we can interact with and something that is used to hold content, for instance. And then the artifact inventory is what I mean with making sure that we extract the data of those objects as well, that we know about, well, okay, we have a workspace, but what are the details for that workspace? And why is this? Well, the activity log will only keep an ID and a name of the artifact in principle, which is good. You can easily get answers to a lot of these things. But for instance, if you want to get more details about a data set that's being used, what's the data source behind this data set? Is it running in import mode and direct query mode? Who has access to this data set? Those are things that you're not going to see in that activity log. It is the what has happened. And then if you want to get answers to the what can happen, who can access these things, that's where you're going to need the artifact information as well. And then most of these artifacts can easily be extracted through API calls. And if you do these API calls, again, through PowerShell, Power Automate functions, Data Factory, whatever you're using, then you can get that information out there as well. And then when you're correlating this information with the activity log, that's where you can get the real cool answers about what's happening in your tenant. And then my personal recommendation is that the admin APIs are your friend, especially if you're looking at get groups as admin, which can give you easily with a simple parameter, can give you an entire overview of what is in a single workspace, or for all the workspaces that you have in there, is something really cool. If you have those admin permissions, if you have those admin privileges, it can take you 2 API calls, 3 API calls maybe, to get an overview of your entire estate in Power BI. If you're not a gigantic Power BI tenant customer. But it's really useful to get that information out there, because as I mentioned, all of these informations help make you informed decisions. And if you're making informed decisions, that's always going to be better than doing something on the gut feeling. I'm assuming, because that's the reason why we're all using Power BI in the first place, to make sure that we can use our data to make visualizations on it, to use that data to make mashups and make those informed decisions. And the admin APIs are good, don't get me wrong, but they only hold that much information. And last year, something new called the Lineage APIs were introduced as well. And these are, they're very cool, but they're a bit more complicated. I will be very honest about this. They are a bit more complicated because of the data that's being returned, but also on how you have to call out these APIs. They are essentially the APIs that live underneath Azure Purview. And Azure Purview is the data catalog solution that Microsoft is working on, where you can get lineage information. What data is coming from which SQL database, and how is it being used in a data set, and how is it being used in a report, for instance. But also that scanner API is going to give you the information of, okay, who has direct access to a data set? Do they have read permissions or build permissions on this data set? What sensitivity label has been applied to a data set? Is it being certified or being promoted? All of that information that is living in the scanner API is really useful to have. And not all of these things exist in the admin APIs that I mentioned. And not all of these things exist in the regular APIs that were the way to do it before. So road ahead is definitely scanner APIs, but it does take you some time to understand what it actually is. And there's not that much guidance out there. There are a few things out there by Joost Blindbeck, the Danish MVP, Tommy Pulia, an American MVP, and some other smaller things out there. And I'm still working on a piece of guidance myself that I'm trying to get published, but it is honestly taking me a while to get a full grasp of the content of the output that is coming out there. But it is extremely interesting to see what comes out there. And then, there we go. You also have this thing called a service principal, which is essentially a managed identity, let's call it this, for Power BI, where you can do unattended calls to APIs, admin operations, etc., which can really help you automate a lot of the things and make sure that you have time for the more useful things in life dealing with Power BI. There are, again, some examples out there. For instance, the one from Joost Blindbeck and the one from Tommy Pulia that exist that can really help you get going as well. But also the session by my colleague Ted Patterson. He's got a lot of information out on Power BI Dev Camp, which really help you dive into these things. And while I'm talking about it, I also know that Gilbert, and I really need to learn how to pronounce his name, Gilbert Kevorier, who's from, well, more your neck of the woods than mine, who's also working on a piece of guidance for using and working with that scanner API. So when we're tying all these things together, what I've seen at a lot of customers, it's a lot of moving pieces. It's a lot of things that you need to get to work to make sure that you have these insights for your Power BI tenant. Well, I mentioned the activity log, the audit log, that you have to get this data. Well, I mentioned also the admin APIs. But in many cases, you also want to have some form of custom data where you're working with your own departmental structure or who's reporting to who, all of these different things. So it's a lot of things that you have to start working together and that you have to start collecting and making sure that they're mashed together to be able to do these insights, to get these insights. And then typically what I saw was that they were landed somewhere in a data lake, or they were landed somewhere on a file storage or into a database in a sort of ETL-like flow, not full data warehouse ETL-like flow, but still it was there. And then in many cases, it was made available as a Power BI data set where then different people could have access to this data, which is a good thing, because I'm also still a very big advocate of making sure that the activity log data is being exposed to the workspace owners so that they actually know how many people are using their reports, or that they know how many people are trying to circumvent their report by exporting to Excel, for instance. So that it is a situation that's not ideal. And then, well, when the Power BI release wave came out, which is the 6-month plan of what is being released, I saw this thing called Administrative Insights on the release wave. By now, it's disappeared from the public release wave, but it is coming back, rest assured. They're working out some kinks to make sure that we can get it into public preview. But this is essentially going to do a lot of that work for you. It's not going to be the complete picture that I painted just before, but it is going to be a lot of these steps done for you, so you can just go to a workspace and get that data because it's already pre-populated in there for you, which is going to be a really interesting thing. It is on the release wave. I hope it'll make it into public preview soon, and then general availability as well. But then, what do we do with tenant settings? Well, these tenant settings are this weird little place where things seem to sprout up like mushrooms. It's a portal where we can go to and then manage whatever behavior we need to manage for Power BI. And the thing is that essentially, since I mentioned that they're sprouting up like mushrooms, new settings keep appearing, well, every single time that I open the admin portal. And it's also very important to document these settings. Why are they being set to a specific setting? Why are we disabling publish to web? Why are we disabling exporting to Excel? Why is this happening? And then if something changes, someone changes this, okay, why is this? Okay, why did we put it in there in the first place? Making sure that we have that documented is going to help in the long run. At this point, it's also not very easy to get an alert or notification when someone makes changes. The only way that you can get this is by having the activity log where you'll see the action tenant feature switch changed, which happens, well, a day after the fact, in most cases. Or if you have those E5 special licenses, you also have the option to set up an alert in the Cloud App Security Center, but that's not for many people, not for every organization. Which means that it is not that very easy to do so. And Matt, great question. I will get to that in a second. So keep aware that these things change, and I highly encourage you to have a discussion about this. Why are we limiting or enabling or restricting certain features? And then have that documented as well. So most of these tenant settings can be scoped to either enable or disable the behavior. Can people do something or not? Or is it the entire organization that can do it, or no one in the organization? Or then including or excluding groups. Can everyone do it except these people? Or can no one do it except these people? For instance, one of the popular things I've seen is creating workspaces where not everyone can do it, except for this group in the organization, where they have the permissions to create a group. And then a mail-enabled security group is what I found to be the most ideal scenario. Why am I saying mail-enabled security group? Well, you can refer to this really interesting blog post by Gilbert again at 4Moo, who has layered out a matrix on where you can use which type of group. And the mail-enabled security group just gives you the most options. That's it. For the tenant settings, it's not going to make that big of a difference if it's an Active Directory security group, if it's an Office 365 group. But because of the fact that you can reuse them in the most places, that's going to be the most interesting scenario for me personally. And then when you're looking at these tenant settings, I encourage you to pay special attention to the workspace settings. I'll dive into them in a bit. The export and sharing settings. How can people get data out of your reports, out of your tenant? Power BI visuals as well. What types of visuals can they use? And yeah, no, those are the ones right now. There are a few links that I've included in the bottom of the page as well. And Matt asked the question to get an answer to, is there a particular easy way to search for a particular tenant setting? The answer is kinda. So there are docs pages that not that many people are aware of that they exist, that have the explanation for most of these tenant settings that exist. The only exception is, and probably why this question pops up from Matt, is that sometimes new settings are released where the documentation is not yet published. And that's something that is not that possible at this point. So long story short, docs pages are a very good way of getting that information out there. Other than that, not really a smooth answer that I have for you. So if I dive into a Power BI environment, this is a developer tenant, public, so there's no hidden previews, no private things in here that you can have. So what I need to do is go up through the ellipsis on the top right corner, then go to Settings, Admin Portal. This will give me the admin portal where I need to be. Especially what I'm looking at right now is tenant settings. This is where I'm starting off with. And then what I mentioned is we need to look at the workspace settings. These are, for me, the most crucial ones that you need to get an idea of. Mainly the one that we have here, create workspaces. By default, it is enabled for everyone, which means that every single user can create a workspace. And remember when I said that it's not just about flipping this to disabled and then walking away with this, it is when we disable this, we need to have that center of excellence, that data culture process in place to make sure that people can still find their way, their procedure to actually get a workspace created for them. And it needs to be in a fairly swift fashion. That's the thing. So this is important as well. Why am I in favor of restricting this? Well, in most cases when it's not, I've seen this lead to a jungle of workspaces. And that's essentially it. So it is something that you want to keep an eye on for, well, the manageability of the workspaces that you have. And then what you need to be aware of as well is that we are in the final phase of migrating the old Office 365 workspaces to the new workspace experience. And that automated migration is kicking off, I think any week now, which you can also influence a bit on what end users are going to notice from this. And then what is happening as well with these export and sharing settings. That is where you can get the behavior for how users can get data out of there. And one of the age-old discussions that I've had with people is exporting to Excel, which means that they can click on the ellipsis of a visual, export data, and then get either the summarized data or the underlying data for the visual. They export that, and then they can go do something else with this. Why am I hinting at restricting this behavior is, well, the second they export this, they'll be away from any of the security, from any of the governance that you have in place here, which can be bothersome. Does that mean that people can no longer work with Excel? No, I'm not trying to start riots. I'm only hinting that it may be a better solution to work with Analyze in Excel, where they work with pivot tables based on the data set itself. And this is where you can go in and say, okay, well, for export in Excel, I want the entire organization to be able to do this, or I can just say, no, only this specific security group can work with, can export their data to Excel. So you get a security group that you've defined, and then you hit the apply button, and that's the same thing. Or if you want to do it the other way around, everyone can work with export to Excel except these people. You hit the accept button, and with the accept button, you can do the other way around. And this will allow you to this will allow you to use, well, pretty much all of the things that you can see, exporting to PowerPoints as well, if they can copy paste visuals, if they can create certifications themselves. It allows you to control a lot of the behavior. And again, reiterating, it's not about restricting, it's about making sure that people can do their work, but that you still have a form of control. And then the other one is Power BI visuals. This is an interesting topic, which obviously leads to lots more explanation. But what is your stance in the organization on using custom visuals? Are they allowed only to use certified visuals, or can they use any visual they want to? For me, what I've mostly said as a consultant, and what I'm still saying at this point, is to only use certified visuals. Certified means that they have that little check mark next to the visual name in the marketplace and in AppSource. Why? Well, because they went through a rigorous process of having code checked, etc., and it's just more secure. If you enable this, that they can only use certified visuals, that is only for reports that get published into the service. People can still use those uncertified visuals in the Power BI desktop environment. And that's not able to being changed at this point. And then, do you still want to be able to people to have the certified visuals and visuals that are not certified? Well, this is where you go to the organizational visuals tab, and where you can go ahead and whitelist visuals for your organization. And you have two options. Either you upload a PBI viz file, or you select a viz from AppSource yourself. Rule of thumb, myself personally, is if you're whitelisting things, get it from the AppSource. Why? It's a lot more easier for you as an admin, period. If you lock down certified visuals and you're wanting to whitelist other visuals, it's also interesting to do a quick security check on the visual. What is that visual actually doing? And how can you do that? Well, you set up an environment where you have test data, development data, and no access to production environments is there. You use that visual, and then you start tracing. What is happening? Fiddler tracing, Wiresharking, the Chrome developer tools, whatever you use. What external calls is that visual doing? What other services are they calling? Are they taking that data onto the supplier's web service and mashing up that data there and sending it back? A popular topic of discussion is maps, because all of the map visuals, they make an external call to a mapping API, Bing, Google, something else, and then return those coordinates for maps, which in some heavily secured organizations doesn't fly, because people will not allow you to do this. And again, same thing. It's not about simply restricting this. It's about, if people cannot do it, how can they get to what they need, if they actually need it? So reiterating on those organizational visuals that I just mentioned, it is about making sure that you have the tenant settings enabled, disabled to the behavior that you'd like to have. And then in the organizational visuals pane, making sure that you have the AppSource, my piece of advice, the AppSource version enabled there if you want to whitelist a specific visual. Then a popular topic as well for data access. Who can access your data? Well, the access is determined on many levels. Data source access is one thing. Who can get access to your SQL server, but that is usually managed by the DBAs. But who can access a data set or report in Power BI is determined by workspace access. Do they have viewer, member, collaborator, admin permissions on that workspace? Do they have access to the workspace app, to the app that is inside of for Power BI? Have they been shared the report and the data set manually? Has someone given them permissions on the data set directly, build permissions or read permissions? Do they have row-level security enabled to their group? Do they have object-level security enabled for their group? And that is a lot of different access points, which you need to be able to get a hold of. And it's not always easy. That's something that I'll be very open about, because a lot of the discussions that I've had are about who can access this data. And then it's getting a hold of all these different levels to make sure that you have that insight. And what some people always forget about, and something that I want to reiterate again, is that a workspace admin, a member or a contributor, they don't have any form of role level security or object level security applied to them. So they will get access to all the data in that workspace, in that data set, or those data sets. They will also have implicit build permissions. So that means that they can create new data sets, new reports on top of that data set. They can use Analyze in Excel, which is something you may want to be aware of. And then, as I mentioned in the beginning, you'll want to monitor those key assets, the HR data, the finance data, the very sensitive data about a new product you're developing. You'll want to keep a close eye on these things by the artifact inventory that I mentioned, by getting those APIs, or by going into the user interface and looking at this yourself. And then what I also want to be aware of is that an admin, a Power BI admin or a global admin, can get themselves and anyone else access to all new workspaces, to the current workspace experience. So don't go handing out Power BI admin privileges willy-nilly to everyone in your organization, because they can break into they can break into all of the data sets that you have and get access to that data. Question, so does that imply you can use RLS on a reader in a workspace? So the viewer role in a workspace is the only way that you can have row level security enforced on your users. Okay, so who can access that data? For having a global overview, you can get the data out there with the scanner APIs, with the parameter get artifact users. But there are also specific APIs that give you the access permissions for a report, an app, a dashboard. Or the other way around. You can also say for user John Smith, what access does he have? And then if you get the admin call for that specific person, it's going to give you a list of everything that that person has access to. Okay, then quickly, briefly, but hopefully enough, on gateways. Gateways are crucial in everything you're doing when you're working with on-premises data, because they enforce the behavior that allow users to publish new data sets and reports to data sources, that they can get data sets and reports published to data sources. And by default, any single user can install both personal and on-premises data gateways in your organization, which means that you can potentially open up corporate data that you don't want to get leaked out there. And I also want you to be sure that you have to debate the policy for personal gateways in your organization. Personal gateway is a simple application that people can install on their laptop and then use it for making sure that they can get Excel files, etc., up to Power BI as well. But they can connect to databases just the same way. If they have access to a data source, then with their personal gateway, they can publish that data to Power BI. And it's not always a scenario that you want to have in your Power BI tenant. And then again, the same thing is that you also want to make sure that you can limit who can install those on-premises enterprise data gateways. And you can do that, I'll have to keep moving for sake of time, but you can do that in the Power Platform Admin Center, which I've got listed in the link below. There you can easily get an overview of which gateways exist and who can also install the on-premises data gateways, which data sources exist. And then if you want to disallow the installation of personal gateways, there is also a link in there that can help you execute a PowerShell command to disable that behavior. Then I also want you to be aware of the gateway and the resources that it needs so that you are able to handle all the incoming requests for refreshing data sets, for data query data sources on that gateway machine, because they are very crucial. And I've seen organizations where they just put it onto a small machine with 4 GB of RAM, and then they're complaining that their 400 GB data set is not refreshing quickly. The gateway plays a crucial role, and it's something that you need to look at as well when you're looking at the broader picture of Power BI. And not necessarily a tenant admin piece, but for those data set designers, that the query folding part is a very important thing, because a gateway machine, if query folding is not being activated, if those operations are not being pushed back to the data source, that data mashup is going to happen on the gateway machine. And if it's, again, that small in-performant box, then yes, your data sources and your data refresh will take a longer time. Then I've also included some links on making sure how you can speed up things with the gateway, how you can get some insights in the gateway, so you'll definitely have some reading done for you on the long run as well. Then the last brief piece before we go into Q&A, the piece of monitoring is a very popular topic as well, because how are you going to get the insights? How are you going to get the information into what is actually happening on your environment? Well, what I've mentioned before on getting that activity log data and artifact data out is a very important piece as well. And then it doesn't have to be a very broad, a very complex, a very complicated solution. You can also just use that data you got from activity log and setting up a simple alert, creating a dashboard tile, setting up a data alert for publish to web actions, for instance. That is also going to get you those notifications with a certain set of delay, which can help you get those alerts that you need until you've got the bigger picture, until you've got the monitoring solution that you actually need up and running. And for me personally, the actions that I try to look at when I'm looking at monitoring is changes to tenant settings. Who's fiddling about with tenant settings? Who's using publish to web? Who's activating the Power BI Pro trials or the in-product trial experiences? Who's exporting data? Who's deleting stuff? Who's fiddling about with gateways, etc. And then if you want to look at a ready-built solution that can help you get more insights, I can also highly recommend Rui Romano's solution that he's got on his GitHub page as well. Link is at the bottom of the slide, and then you can get to this as well. So I will skip the bonus part because we did run out of time, and I want to give you time for Q&A as well. So my takeaways are: make sure that you've got an extraction process set up for the activity log and the artifacts, because it will save you in the long run. Then have tenant settings that for key areas have them scoped to the behavior that you need in the organization. Scope to the behavior that you need, but again, reiterating, it's not just about disabling and restricting switches, it's about making sure that people can do their jobs and you can still have a form of governance applied to this. Set yourself up for having some form of alerting or insights for external failures and internal failures as well. And then monitor for the creation and the configuration of data gateways, or restrict whatever floats your boat in the organization. And then tenant admins are a crucial piece of the puzzle in making sure that that data culture, that center of excellence, is happening in the organization. Making sure you keep yourself updated is also a very useful piece as well. Last piece of advice: Mr. Google is our very, very, very best friend. You cannot know everything. You need to look at external things as well. Lots of things exist for helping yourself keep updated, making sure that you learn new things, that you're aware of new things that are being published. Take a look at these and then make sure that you keep yourself updated. One thing, check for the release date, as if you're looking at something that's 2 years old, it might not be as relevant anymore because things have changed. Lots of references exist in the slide deck. Again, who am I? And while we go to Q&A, you can find slides here. You can either scan the QR code, or you can go to github.com/Benni De Jagere. Now, if you've got questions, fire away.
Well, thanks a lot, Benny, for a very detailed presentation. So, of course, we've got people online, we've got people in the room here. So if anyone in the room's got a question, so we do have one in the room, so I'm going to take the microphone over so that Benny can hear. So here we go.
Thank you. So can an end user save activity log for more than 30 days?
Can an end user see the activity log for more than 30 days?
No, save.
Save.
Yeah.
So an end user, if they do not have Power BI admin privileges or Office 365 global admin privileges, they cannot get access to the activity log in the first place.
I meant the report activities. Like they click on, you see the report activity.
The report usage metrics.
Yes.
Yeah. No. It's the same. It's the same answer. The data disappears if you want to access it for more than 30 days. So it's the same thing. If you really want to have that data, extract the data somewhere else and then distribute it again. I need to find the link again, but there is a hacky workaround solution to extract all the report usage metrics data sets that exist in a tenant so that you can use that data out there. But I need to Google for it again.
Is that a different set of data? The inbuilt
it's the
automatic analytics?
It's the if you go into a Power BI data
usage set, analytics, right?
Yeah, not analytics.
But you have to turn it
usage
on.
Metrics. Yeah.
Usage
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So you have the one at the admin level, but you also have the one on a data set level. Where are the reports in there? Where you go into and then if you click here and get the usage metrics, then it's going to create that, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's that data that you're referring to, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. No, the data disappears after 30 days.
Okay,
so if you want the data extracted.
Okay, now we have another question.
Thanks for the comprehensive chat, Benny. That was great. I've started somewhere new recently and have been looking at Purview as a way to get sort of data lineage, that sort of stuff. Yep. But it doesn't do a lot of the things that it's planned to do, I guess. So I've been relying on the scanner APIs to get most of the lineage back to data source. Do you have any insight about what's coming with Purview when, and whether or not we can expect it to take over from a lot of the sort of solutions you've been talking about?
Yeah, great question. So I don't have detailed insights on roadmap, private and public for Purview. It's one of the things that I want to dive into myself. I do know that the statement is that Purview should have all the features that you currently have in scanner APIs, and that it should go beyond that as well. So the goal is that they try to have the complete end-to-end apprehensive lineage view, but they're not there yet. Obviously, they're working hard, but I don't have timelines roadmap for this.
Hi, Benny. My question is regarding the report metrics for PBI-RS. So I know that the traditional method is, the reporting services that we have, premium capacity and all. So the traditional method is there is a database and then you query just like we used to do for SSRS.
Log 1, 2, 3. Yes.
Just like we used to do for SSRS. But then like since the SSRS days, so much time has evolved, and is there a more sophisticated way to get the report metrics? Because with the Power BI service, the reporting metrics is quite sophisticated, so people are used to it. But if we tell them that for reporting services, no, you have to write an SQL query, then they get a bit disappointed. So
there's work being done, but nothing that I can share publicly. It's a vague answer, I know, but that's all I can say at this point.
It's in the pipeline.
You'll never get an answer from Microsoft or something that's coming. But yeah, so you're saying it's being worked on
for a while. Yeah.
You're saying there is some work being done, but you can't share any more information at this stage. So get in touch with PageNoted Report Bear and agitate would be my suggestion. Now, Benny, there's a question in the chat. I don't know if you noticed that. I might read it out for everyone here. So I might have missed it, but I think you didn't mention about premium capacity metrics app in the tenant admin. How do you utilize this?
That is correct. I didn't mention anything about premium capacity metrics app. Sake of time, mostly, because this was already a lot of things to shove into 45 minutes, and metrics app itself takes another 30, 40 minutes as well. I have another session. I also know that Chris Novak, the premium PM, is on the verge of publishing a webinar specifically for metrics app information. So that's something that you may want to look into to get those insights as well.
Okay, great. Now I've got a couple of notes that I've made myself. Just let me accept this person into the lobby.
There is one more question from Susan as well in the chat that you may want to take. Yeah.
Okay, so I asked during the presentation, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but so why is there no search? Like if you go into that tenant page you're in, like there's pages and pages of stuff. I found now that I actually go into find on this page in the browser to try and find the section where they're basically doing that. I would have thought that it was a pretty basic feature to be able to put some sort of search and find the relevant setting.
Yeah.
Can you get that organized?
The Microsoft answer is ideas@powerbi.com. But there's work being done because new features keep getting added every week. And it's getting really hard to find the exact things that you need. So there's work being done at this. But again, nothing that I can share publicly.
Okay, so my second question relates to the documentation for APIs. Now, there used to be a feature on that documentation
it's coming back.
Okay, good, because that was great. So for everyone else's benefit, there used to be a feature called Try It. You could go to the documentation, you click Try It, and it literally gives you a token, and you can actually run the API without having to know PowerShell or anything. Now, I wouldn't know PowerShell front from back, but I successfully used these Try It APIs. It was fantastic. There's a blog article on my website if you're interested. But it disappeared recently. It sounds like it's coming back, so that's great.
Yeah, it's underlying issues that they're getting resolved because it was causing a bit too much stress. And as soon as they've got that resolved, it's coming back. And it's a matter of days, not the usual coming soon that we say.
Okay, that's great. All right, and then my last question relates to, you sort of started off saying a lot of organizations don't have their own tenant admin, and maybe you get a power user sort of gets default, or you get to do it. What do the pure tenant admins do when they need to build a Power BI data model? Because basically what you showed in your model is that they can extract this data using APIs or PowerShell, but presumably they're not experts in data modeling. So what do organizations do? Do they get the power user to come and build a model for them? How does that work?
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's one of the last assignments that I've did as a consultant was help get an organization get all the data out and then create a star schema on top of this to help them make those decisions. Purely activity log, it's fairly easy because you can create a really nice looking star schema on this, but all the scanner API data is hard to make a proper model out of this. And honestly, I've not cracked it completely myself yet. I've spoken to Hughes about this. I've spoken to Tommy Puglia about this. And to get that into a proper data model is not that easy because of the darned JSON format that the data is in. But yes, in most cases, it's a collaboration between the admin on getting the data out and a modeler on modeling the data.
Okay, great. All right, now you mentioned there's a couple of questions. So one from Susan, is there a report or API to get live information on what's maxing out a capacity? So peak capacity issues.
Yeah, so report, yes, it's the premium capacity metrics app that Janisa referred to in her previous question as well, or in their previous question. API, no, not planned at this moment. Well, no public APIs. Sorry, there are APIs, but they're not meant for public usage.
Okay, great. And then the last question we have here is from James, and he's asking about, are you aware of any thought or functionality allowing things like write back for a matrix table? I know there's some custom visuals out there. I've done a lot of work with Info River, which does write back. I know Power On Solutions has got a write back.
As well.
Actoris has got another one. So Martin Kratzky's got one. So yeah, any insights you can share there?
Matrix is a topic that we're discussing heavily to get some more parity towards Excel tables that we've seen in the first place. To answer your question, short term, this release wave, next release wave, I'd probably refer to custom visuals like Info River. Does Zebra do write back? I don't know.
Info River does, yeah.
Yeah, Info River, Power On, Actoris, Power Apps yourself. That is the way to go if you want to have write back. And then depending on, do you want to do it yourself? Do you want to license? Have that discussion internally. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's it. I think we're done. So thank you very much, Benny. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for the thorough presentation.